And welcome Reb Sandra Wortzel, friend, colleague, mashpia, spiritual director, artist. I just want to read something very briefly, which you might have read in her bio that I posted, because this is my sneaky way of putting some of her artwork up on the screen. Rabbinic pastor and mashpia ruchanit Sandra Wortzel enjoys integrating the things she knows and loves. Jewish renewal, expressive arts. Let's see some of those expressive arts. Ooh, isn't that nice? So, what's the medium there, Sandra?
It's a lino cut print make. It's a hand printed lino cut block that I carved myself and then printed.
Wow, maybe someday we'll bring you back to do some art with us. She encourages
Absolutely.
others to express their yearnings through the arts. And she was a student practitioner of Mussar since 2010 and integrates Mussar practice into every aspect of your life and work. Okay, don't get jealous, but she lives in the Redwoods on the Mendocino coast in California. And the only reason you don't see her on Shabbos morning is the obvious. I wouldn't be here either. Although we do have some people who do come from the West Coast. She lives there with her husband Kenny and their golden retriever Zusha. And when I die, when I'm on my deathbed, I'm going to be crying. I said, "Why weren't you Zusha?" And then I'll bark, and then I'll pass on. That's a limited audience for that joke. Uh,
I get it.
thank you. Let's give it up. Please welcome our friend and teacher, Sandra Wortzel.
Hi, everybody. I know just about almost everybody on this call. This is great. It's so great to see all your beautiful faces. Hi, Devorah and Shosh and Eliana and Joe. And of course, Shulamit and Sarabina. Wow, this is great. Oh, and Meir Bracha. Hi. It's wonderful. Well, I really want to start with just this beautiful intention of dedicating our practice and our learning today to Chazan Jack Kessler and Rabbi Marsha Prager for healing, for wholeness, for ease, for whatever is needed most for them in this moment in time. And all our love, of course. So just wanted to encapsulate our learning together today for that.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you. So I thought we'd start out didactically. I'll share some things about the particular midot that I would like to focus on tonight, and then we will I'm going to do a guided visualization, and then we'll have some breakthrough rooms where we're in dyads, talking about how we relate to the two midot that we'll be learning about tonight, which are patience and acceptance. And then we'll come back together and do some sharing and time for questions, answers, anything else, discussion, singing, dancing, whatever we want to do together. So falling asleep, I don't, it's only 4:39 here. So I know it's much later where most of you are anyway. So okay, so we'll just get right into it. I'm going to start out by talking about patience. And the Hebrew word is savlanut. So a definition of patience, the capacity to accept, which we already have that word now into intermingling with patience, the capacity to accept or tolerate delay, trouble, or suffering without getting angry or upset. A use of the word just in a regular sentence, she treated her students with great patience and humor. Some synonyms for patience are forbearance, tolerance, restraint, self-restraint, resignation, could be, stoicism, fortitude, sufferance, we're going to come back to that one in a bit, endurance, calmness, composure, There's a whole bunch of others, but that's good. And maybe you have some other ideas about patience. Are there other words that you might add to that feel accurate for you when you think about patience and being patient?
Well, if I may, in Mitzrayim, the word that is used in the sacred text is sovel, and which is the same root of the word savlanut, which is patience. And so sovel is a burden. And as Mindy Shapiro shared with us the first night, um, she thinks of Mussar practice as carrying the burden of another person, which comes in a lot in the middah, through the middot. So I just wanted to remind us of that teaching from the first night, um, and um, and we sometimes have to be patient with ourselves in carrying our own burden, I think, too.
Right. That's right. And actually, I will be getting to exactly what you just said in a few minutes. So, so you'll hear it again. Rabbi Menachem Mendel Leffen of Satanov, from his book Cheshbon HaNefesh, The Accounting of the Soul. When something bad happens to you and you do not have the power to avoid it, do not aggravate the situation even more through wasted grief. Through wasted grief. To learn patience, we need first to pay attention to what impatience feels like. Impatience arises from an inner conflict. We want something to happen the way we want it to happen. We experience and are challenged by the middah of patience every day on the micro and macro levels of our lives, from the mundane of waiting in a line at a store, to check out, to holding out for the right time for a medical procedure, or for horrific wars to end, or for an election to be over, all so that we may move forward in some way in our life. Impatience arises when we want to have things our way, but cannot. Exercising patience feels like a burden because we have to put the brakes on a self that's moving toward a goal. And as Mark said, the Hebrew word for patience, savlanut, implies just that, as it comes from the root samach vet lamed, meaning to bear, to transport a heavy load, or to suffer. This meaning is present in the English word forbearance, a synonym for patience that we don't use much anymore, but it certainly has that meaning as well. So practicing savlanut often involves physical restraint, curbing the impatience that we feel surging in our bodies. If we do not heed these bodily messages, we're likely to act out of our impatience in many verbal as well as nonverbal ways. When we verbalize our impatience, we're likely to snap at others or raise our voices. When we express impatience nonverbally, we sigh, we raise an eyebrow, we tap our fingers. So by focusing on where in our body we feel and express our impatience, we can recognize our need to work with this middah. All of these physical expressions, even though we may minimize them as automatic reactions, tend to diminish the person that's in front of us, almost as if we were making them invisible. So I'm going to read that again because I think it's a really important piece. All of these physical expressions that might be outwardly expressed by us, even though we may minimize them as automatic reactions, diminish the person in front of us, almost as if we were making them invisible. And I'm sure all of us can think of moments in time when somebody became impatient with us and how uncomfortable that felt when we weren't ready to move on, or we didn't understand something and we needed it repeated, or slow down, I didn't quite catch that. And when somebody responds in a way that lets us know they're feeling impatient, it diminishes our own self-esteem, our, feelings about ourselves. So when we find ourselves feeling impatient, we can suppress the outward expression before it occurs by practicing restraint. By avoiding any outward expression of impatience, we begin to honor the person who is our other at that moment. The middah of Savlanut, patience, the measure of our patience or impatience, can thus be seen as a wake-up call in our relationships. And I didn't attend the first two sessions with all of you, but so I don't know if your other teachers spoke about this, but for me, Mussar is an extremely relational experience. Yes, there's this internal practice, which we work on our own ethical traits, but it's all in relationship to the other. It's not, yes, we can look at like, how am I patient or impatient with myself? And that matters, that's important. Of course, how we treat ourselves is often reflective of how we might treat others. Not necessarily, sometimes we treat others way better than we treat ourselves. So there is that, but I really love to think about the Mussar practice as, in general, as a whole, as a way in which we enrich our ability to be in relationship to another person, to others, whoever those others are, from the very closest, most intimate people in our lives to the absolute stranger on the street, and everything in between. So I want to just put that in the framework of your experience or your way of thinking about Mussar practice. It is very relational experience. Okay, so Savlanut as choice. So working on Savlanut is about making a choice. Instead of seeing our impatience as something that happens to us as a result of the circumstances in which we find ourselves, we decide to take personal responsibility and choose to be patient rather than impatient in the very same situation. So here's some questions we can ask as we confront a situation that makes us impatient. What am I feeling right at this moment? What is the source of my impatience? Am I perhaps feeling resentment or fear, or boredom, or, could be any number of things, right? Do I feel the need to be in control of the situation? Impatience often comes up when we feel out of control. For everything from, a minuscule amount of out of control to our chaotic world and completely out of control, things that we have absolutely no control over no matter what. And so that's a very large spectrum, right, of very small things that some of them might be somewhat in our control or totally in our control, to things that are completely beyond the possibility of our controlling it. If I am not in control, how can I let my desire for control go? Am I only thinking about myself and my own needs? Can I also think about the others in the situation and their needs? So here's where we begin to interweave acceptance with patience, and why I wanted to bring these two midot together, because I find them to be, should I say, great bed partners. They really work beautifully together, and I think without acceptance, patience can sometimes be lacking. So I'll say more. So if we're unable to accept a situation, we inevitably act out our resistance. And on the other hand, when we accept the situation, and when we surrender to what's happening in the moment, we can let go of our annoyance, our wasted grief, and lighten not only our own load, but also the load of the others around us. So the assumption here is that it's always easy to make room for the other and to lovingly accept them as our responsibility. But we know that it can be quite difficult because from the perspective of the self, the other can be a potential threat in some way. We fear that they might ask too much of us. Bearing the other as our burden demands that we think and act beyond ourselves. Sometimes take the higher road, or often have to take the higher road. And that's not always easy to do. It's not always easy to do. So patience requires that we experience this demand and nonetheless agree to bear it. And in order to do this, we sometimes have to be patient with ourselves, right? As we feel our own pain and that of others. None of us likes to feel that pain, and yet it's just bottom line, it's part of life, right? So that's where the acceptance comes in, right? It's like, okay, I know this is hard, I know this is painful, or I know this is annoying, and okay, what am I willing to accept, and how am I willing to accept it? And so we can learn this aspect of patience, for instance, from how we handle the grief we feel for the death of a loved one. We do not feel it or get over it quickly. The complex system of Jewish rituals lasting a year helps us learn to bear such grief and to move through it. And I think that's really applicable when we talk about patience, when we think about the grieving process and how long it takes our systems to kind of catch up emotionally with the experience of grief and loss. And the need to be patient. Like, we want to be over with it, and other people want us to be over with it. And I can remember when my mom passed away, and I'd have to say I really grieved for 2.5 years. I mean, it was painful and difficult, and she died too young at 75, and it was hard to just accept. And people were really ready for me to be over with my grief, but I wasn't there. And so I had to be patient with myself, regardless of the fact that other people may not have been. So Pirkei Avot, the sayings of our ancestors, tell us that one of the 48 ways to acquire Torah is to bear the burden of the other, as Mark was saying earlier. The Mussar masters placed a special emphasis on this concept and saw it as the foundation of a pathway toward all spiritual growth. Patience demands that we bear the burden of others, whether that burden is a flaw in character, or even when the burden is a behavior or action that we might find objectionable. And if we're to nurture our patience, in most circumstances, we must learn the art of bearing the burden of unlikable character traits and behavior in others and in ourselves as well. So the very next method mentioned in Pirkei Avot is to judge others favorably, which is also a very beautiful concept and goes hand in hand with this carrying the burden of the other. Many commentaries are of the opinion that judging others favorably is a biblical commandment derived from the verse in Leviticus, which states, "Judge your friend righteously." We are being told here to move from bearing the burden of another and actually to judge the other person's actions or words in a positive light. This opens a whole nother dimension and pathway to deal with our impatience. Giving the other the benefit of the doubt demands that we develop a positive eye rather than a critical eye. And that could be EYE, or it could be the letter I. Both. And in fact, our tendency is to assess guilt and condemn without even considering any alternative, especially innocence, as a possibility. Yet we form a judgment that's often factually wrong. How often do we decide with instant clarity that someone is lazy, only to find out they suffer from arthritis? How often do we jump to conclusions that are mistaken? If we train ourselves to stop passing sentence on everyone we meet for how they talk, what they wear, how they sit, who they sit with, and introduce a positive explanation of things that others do or say which upset us, we will have equipped ourselves with a very valuable tool to foster patience. Okay, so I'm going to stop there before I offer a visualization and just open up space for comments, thoughts, anything at all you'd like to add to this. Yeah, Devora.
Hello, Sandra.
Hi.
I haven't seen you in so long.
Long time.
I just want to ask, what is the Hebrew term for acceptance? If patience is Savlanut.
I don't know.
Oh,
And
okay.
it's a great question. And I didn't look it up. And interestingly, I actually, in all my Mussar books, there is no specific writings about acceptance. And so
I was looking also in different groups or different, institutes, whatever, and I couldn't really find anything. So I thought, yeah.
Yeah, and so I'll just tell you where how I developed my own love of acceptance. So 5 years after my mom died, my dad was in the dying process, and then he passed away. And that whole year I took on for me, besides like changing out the middah every 2 weeks or once a month, I also have one that I keep with me all year as part of my toolkit that I like to focus on. And so when my dad passed away, I chose acceptance because there are a lot of other things going on in my life. It doesn't matter, but it was really important. And I found it to be very comforting to be able to acquiesce to acceptance, to really letting go, letting into, this is what's happening. And so I actually don't know the Hebrew word. Mark, your Hebrew's way better than mine. Any thoughts about?
I'm actually not sure there is a middah for acceptance, like you're saying. Kabbalah is receiving, so there is something called middah Kabbalat Yisurin, which there is a line in Rabbi Yochanan. I think I've mentioned this in the past few weeks sometimes. He would go to a friend who was sick and ask him, "Is your suffering?" The word's not pleasurable. I forget what the word is. Is this something that you want to live with, right? And of course, the person's answer would be no. But the word for that is yisurin, is your is suffering. So it is the acceptance of the middah of suffering, which I don't know is exactly what we're trying to,
I
put
think more, I think the word would be more surrender, not submission. I'm not talking about submission, but surrender as in like giving over, to giving over to. So I'm not exactly sure how to say that in Hebrew because my Hebrew is not great, but that's what I would liken it to. Surrender.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's great. Sheila, hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Okay. Along the same lines, as I thought about the part about being patient and allowing for patience, my feeling is that with patience, I have to allow myself to be patient to take the next step, because so many times in my life, I have wanted to fix things, and I realized, no, I'm not God. In fact, I realize I've heard his laugh. He thinks I'm very, very funny. And when I turn it over to him, it turns out much better, because it allows me to open up, stop clenching, and allow Hashem's wisdom and words to come into my being. So maybe it is, and I think it's all those things. I think it's sort of like opening up a thesaurus, and you've got, is it acceptance? Is it patience? Is it surrender? I think it could be temporary acceptance, and just enough to open up for the patience to see the right path, because there's all kinds of forks in the road.
Yeah, that's
Surrender.
beautiful.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I said that's beautiful, beautiful melding. Yeah.
Thank you. And then with the surrender, I don't know, surrender is kind of permanent. I remember when my mother, Shalom, was dying, and I was it's 19 years. I was the cheerleader, I was the one that had the blinders on, and it's okay. I think everybody, especially at that moment, needs somebody to be positive for them. And it hit me hard, obviously, but I was able to have the patience and to, I don't know if I ever accepted it. Like you, it took me a long, long time. And yeah, I still miss her like crazy. It was 2 years ago yesterday that my father passed away. So, everything hits, it's that familiar anguish, that grief. But
Sheila, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but
thank you.
I have another piece that I really want to do, and then
Sure,
we're
well, thank you.
actually going to get
I
to
was
be
finished.
dyads, and you'll get to share some more. So
Yes.
I thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate that. Eliana, did you want to just add something?
When you said to judge others righteously and to give them the benefit of the doubt. During this time of Elul, I've been really going into forgiveness. And I think that that's one of the keys for me, is to be able to get out of myself and into the other person, and see where the hurt in me came from. It usually comes from a hurt in them. Yeah. Barty.
Beautiful, Shamati. Thank you. Thank you. Great. Yeah, and we're gonna break off in a little bit in diets, so people can share some more. Okay, so I'm going to bring you through a little visualization, and I'll start by telling a little story, a Talmudic story. The Talmud tells the story of Rabbi Akiva, one of our sages, who, though of humble origins, became one of the greatest sages. He was the son of a convert who was once a thoroughly ignorant and illiterate shepherd. At the age of 40, while out tending his flocks, he noticed a rock with a strange hole penetrating right through it. He observed that this hole was created by constantly dripping water. Rabbi Akiva took away this message: if water, which is soft, can hollow out a stone, which is hard, how much more would the words of the Torah, which are hard, be able to cut through and make an impression on my heart, which is soft? So even he, a 40-year-old man who did not even know the Hebrew alphabet, could learn Torah through constant effort. And he was supported by his wife, and he went to study for 12 years. Then he went and studied 12 more, and he became a great sage and acquired many students. And the Mussar teachers give great credit to the power of of visualization and holding vivid images in the mind leaves a trace on our souls that is more direct and lasting than an intellectual notion. So to cultivate patience, our visualization is to imagine that you're watching a slow drip of water plinking down on a rock. So I'm going to invite you to close your eyes or just have a soft gaze for a few moments as I bring you through this brief visualization. So imagine a natural source of water. It could be a rivulet, a stream, a waterfall, whatever comes to mind for you. And fully form this scene in your mind. When you're ready, see the water dripping very slowly from its source. Is there moss along the wall? Is there a steady rhythm to the drip, drip, drip? Or however else you might imagine it. Maybe sometimes it flows quickly and sometimes in the drier season it flows more slowly. And look down to see that the water is falling onto a large rock. And already the steady dripping has eroded a small indentation in the rock. One drip hits the little pool, then another, then another, and then another. And you see the water flow gently and insistently onto the rock. And visualize that each drop of water has the effect of knocking loose the tiniest fragment of sand from the surface of the rock, no more than a molecule or two. Then another drop and another molecule of sand, and another drop and another molecule of sand, and another drop and another molecule of sand. Imagine that these moments have strung together one by one until they occupy a whole day. A whole week. A whole month. A whole year. And after a whole year has passed, can you see that the surface of the rock has eroded just a millimeter? And another year passes, and another, until 1,000 years have passed. There, see, in the center of your rock, a hole has been carved all the way through, wrought slowly, drip by drip of the water. And if you'd like to, you can spend a few moments every day visualizing this scene and the transformation of the rock. You can take your time to really let these images become vibrant in your mind. And the impact of this visualization is not in what it makes you think, but in the deep imprint made by these images, deep within you, beyond the reach or understanding of your conscious mind. When you're ready, take a few moments And you can open your eyes. And I'm happy to send that little visualization, and Mark can send it out if folks would like it. It's quite lovely, and you can record your own voice doing it and listen to it if you like. I like to do that sometimes. So, okay, we're going to shift gears just a little bit and tie in the middah of acceptance even more. And as I said a little earlier, not a lot has been written about this middah, but I find it really essential in my Mussar toolkit, especially as I age, and hopefully helping me age more gracefully by accepting changes. Yeah, probably don't need to say more about that. Everybody gets it. So when I looked up the definition for acceptance, some of the words came was receiving, Kabbalah, embracing, affirming, integrating, welcoming, the expansive embrace of acceptance. So there's a passage in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous that summarizes the value of acceptance beautifully. Here's how it goes. And acceptance is the answer to all my problems today. Nothing, absolutely nothing happens in God's world by mistake. Unless I accept life completely on life's terms, I cannot be happy. I need to concentrate not so much on what needs to be changed in the world as on what needs to be changed in me and my attitudes. So a very brief story. I will share a personal story. So I'm part of the Hevra Kadisha here, which is the Holy Society that does the beautiful mitzvah, the final mitzvah of washing a deceased body, preparing them for burial. And for many years in Tucson, I was part of a Hevra Kadisha, community Hevra Kadisha there. And we had particular ways in which minhag, really customs, there's really not much halakha around tahara, and most of it's minhag from community to community. So there were certain ways that I was very used to doing things. And when I moved here, I became a member of our Hevra Kadisha. We're a very small community up here. And recently we did a tahara for someone, and there were some moments where I was shaken is a little too strong, but things were happening in ways that were different than I was used to. And there were a few times when I made a gentle comment to the leader. Somebody usually takes the lead to do the tahara, and then the team works together. And inadvertently, it threw the person who was leading kind of off. And she felt like I was questioning our community, questioning the minhag in our community. And it was really coming from an innocent place, but I realized after it was not the time and place for me to be questioning those things, and that it was something for a discussion later that we could talk about, not while we're doing it. And apologize to everybody, the team, the person that was leading, when we were outside and discussing it. And I realized also that for me, what really needed to happen was I need to accept that the minhag here is different than what I was used to, and how I was taught to do things. And so yesterday we had a meeting, and we were discussing the minhag here, and possibilities to, additions that we might add to doing it, changing the liturgy some, and things like that. And that was the right time and place to be able to discuss those things. And so it was just, it's just a snippet of like how I really needed to look at my own responsibility in that and bear the burden, and also accept that that's not necessarily how things are done here, and that's okay too. And so with my ability to self-reflect and be able to accept that reality, I can move forward, and we could all move forward and feel good about it together. It was a big learning for me. You know, it was an important juncture for me to shift my attitude and take responsibility to do that, and you know, knowing that the ultimate thing is that we are taking care of members of our community in the best possible way. So there's so many ways to approach the middah of acceptance. We can look at acceptance of oneself, our own limitations, and certainly acceptance of our own attributes and gifts, acceptance of others and their limitations and their attributes and gifts, acceptance of community, expectations versus reality. Sometimes we have ideas about what we imagine or what we think this community, a circle of people that we belong to or part of should look like or be. And sometimes that doesn't actually match the reality. And it's important for us to reflect on that and accept what's true. And then, of course, there's the larger scope of acceptance of our world and all of its beauty and its chaos and so many things beyond our control, as I mentioned earlier. So here's the juncture where we're going to take some time to be in breakthrough rooms, and Mark's going to put us in dyads. And
So I have a question before
Yeah.
we begin. Shosh and MOSh, you are there together. So we're going in dyads. So I don't have much of a choice. But for the two of you, you guys get along? You think you can? Okay, fine.
Great. Good. Okay, so Mark is gonna I gave him a set of questions that he's gonna put in the chat, and you
I'm
can
gonna
look at
put
these.
it. So I'm going to put it in the chat, and which it just
Yeah.
went in.
Good.
And you want to read through them, or you just
Yes,
want people
I'm
to?
gonna read through them.
Okay, so I'm
And
going to put it up on the screen too.
okay, great. And as Mark and I discussed earlier, the way in which you're used to doing your breakthrough rooms and talking, holy listening and holy responding. So what I would like to suggest is that, let's see, it's 5:18 or 8:18, whatever, or 7:18, whatever it is now, I don't know, 8:18 your time. And we go till quarter of, right?
That's right.
Yeah, okay, great. So let's say each person has about 6 minutes. Does that sound good? And then about 2 minutes of just a reflection on the holy listeners part of like where they might have been touched or moved by something that they heard their partner saying. Not an interpretation or not to question it, but just like, you know, how you were touched or moved by something that the other person shared. And you can take any of these questions and use them, or just bounce off of them and then go into your own thoughts about either acceptance or patience or both, and how they might work for you in your life, or how they are working or how they are not working. So how do you experience acceptance in relationship to yourself? How do you experience acceptance in a close relationship from you to another person? How might acceptance support your spiritual growth? What might you like to incorporate from this middah that supports your own growth and ethical and spiritual development? And then with patience, how do you experience patience with yourself? Where is it working? Where might it be lacking? How do you experience your ability to be patient in a relationship that's important to you? How might patience support your spiritual growth? What might you like to incorporate from this middah of patience that supports your own growth in ethical and spiritual development? Okay. So we will get into our breakouts and I'll see you on the other side.
Great. So I'm going to let everybody take 5 minutes apiece since we're running a little bit later than we
Okay.
thought at this point. And I'll give you for each person, I'll give everybody a 1 minute heads up to start to wrap it up.
So yes, Deborah.
Well, an overriding feeling I felt as you've been talking tonight is that practicing patience and acceptance have given me a lot more peace in my life. And it's physical, mental, emotional, I guess spiritual too. It's like it's not consuming me in the same way that it did for like a lot of my life. So that's one of the, I guess it's one of the byproducts, or maybe it's one of the goals of these.
Absolutely. Absolutely one of the goals. And I love what you're saying, because what you're saying is really we could fit it into a four worlds approach, because I think practicing Mussar touches on every level of our being: physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual, and that the middah can be applied in all those different ways and integrated in all those different ways. So thank you for bringing that forward. That's beautiful. And I'm glad that it's bringing you some peace. Yeah, thank you. Shosh and MOSh.
We discussed a couple general aspects of the midot that there's a balance in each. You know, like humility is no more than your space, no more less than your place.
Right.
And because acceptance that everybody else is wrong is not useful and could support things that aren't good. So words that I've learned as Phyllis's partner, discernment is needed to understand where people are coming from. And then there always has to be a balance, just like ethics. You know, autonomy is not the only value. And you have to balance it. And I think to get to acceptance, I think you at least owe yourself and the other person some discernment. You know, if there's something different in their behavior or their beliefs, then you have empathy for, acknowledge it, and then try to understand it. The other general thing is how relationships affect the midot. You know, your acceptance of your activities or behaviors of your spouse might be different than a stranger. And then, of course, you process it. So
Right.
those are two things that we talked about. Phyllis has, MOSh has something.
Yeah, those are all great points. And I just want to, just in response to one thing you said, which is, you know, there's one thing like what acceptance, which doesn't necessarily mean we agree with the other person or anything like that, but we can accept that that's how they feel or that's how they think. Or and we also, you know, there's this balance, like you said, about tolerating, like we also don't want to be like a schmata that stepped on, you know, like so there, you know, there is this balance that we have to discern for ourselves, and know what our own limits are, and what we're capable of and what we're not, or what's acceptable to us and what's not, you know. So
Yeah.
absolutely.
Acceptable. It's interesting. Yeah. Can I add just a thought?
Yes,
Which
please.
is the thing that keeps coming back to me when we've been talking is, you know, the serenity prayer, right? So, and I, you know, which is for just to refresh, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And then actually, it's funny because I didn't realize it, but what's been floating in my head too with this whole thing is conversation is another middah, menuchat hanefesh, right? Equanimity, which is serenity, right? So it all kind of is that balancing act of, like I just said, and I didn't understand, I'm reading up about it on Google, that the serenity prayer is so embedded into Alcoholics Anonymous too. You
Yes.
talked about the 12 steps, and
That's where it comes from, right?
I didn't realize that. Yeah. So the whole thing kind of comes together, but I love the juxtaposition of acceptance. And I like that word better than surrender, just for whatever connotations it has. And as a balance to patience, the more you can accept, the more patient you can be.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Oh, wonderful reflections. And I'm aware of the time. And so I just want to, Mark asked me if I would just mention to you all, if you're, so this 4-week experience of different midot and different people teaching about Mussar, and if you're interested in continuing on your own, there's numerous ways you can do that. One is find a chavruta, find a study buddy that wants to practice Mussar with you, and start with a simple text like Alan Marinis's Everyday Holiness, which is, I would say, basic foundational Mussar for the layperson, and create a curriculum together and make a commitment to practice for a year and see how it goes. And you can choose to meet weekly or bi-monthly, and you choose a middah to work on for 2 weeks or one a month, or whatever floats your boat. There's no have tos or absolutes about the ways in which you practice. I mean, there are some prescribed things, but you can also aberrate and make it work for you. So there's also groups to join, or maybe there's somebody that would be willing in MOSh to facilitate a group of very interested and committed people who really want to go on with this work in a more serious way. And I highly encourage you to do that. Mussar, absolutely, the practice of Mussar has changed me and changed my life. And it's so completely integral in who I am and how I am in the world at this point in my life. Yeah. So, and it's such a beautiful Jewish practice, So anyway, I highly encourage you, and I'm certainly happy to talk to anybody about it anytime.
Thank you, Sandra. Let's give it up in a Moshnik way for Sandra. Thank you
Thank you.
for giving of your heart and your wisdom to us this evening. Something that I've been mentioning, I think every week, one of the primary sources for Mussar work is Mesilat Yesharim, The Path of the Just, written by Luzzatto, and it's in the 1700s. So this practice is a long time, and then there were yeshivot that dedicated itself to the improvement of midot, and that's what the students really concentrated on. And again, as I have said before, I just love something that's in his introduction where he says, I'm going to teach you everything I tell you in this book you already know. And I think for me, what he's saying is that we have embedded with us. We know what to do. We know what's right. We know how to be menschlich, right? But we forget. We get busy with life, and we have blinders on, and we don't see. And then we start to treat ourselves and each other unkindly. We have a lack of patience. I don't know about you, but I do at times. And we need some kind of practice to remind us, to bring us back to a foundational ground, so we're more grounded. And so I hope that this third of the fourth presentations was helpful, and that it's going to, in time, inspire a MOSh Mussar either group or at least if two of you found each other to work in Chavruta, Dayenu, that would make that would make me very happy. You know, my children. And so let us turn. Again, thank you, Sandra. Always a delight. We'll all be out there to join you next week. I hope you have room for us.
Lots of room. You can always pitch a tent in my yard.
Practice of Elul through the end of Sukkot. Simchat Torah is to offer Psalm 27. Speaking of being patient, to shifti beveit Adonai kol yemei chayai, to sit in God's house. You're supposed to be meditating 24/7? I don't think so. I think it speaks of a moment that comes through of aha, a moment of real connection with divinity in which we see ourselves in the greater light. Achat sha'alti Beit Adonai Ota Avakesh. One thing I ask of you, my holy friend, to sit in your presence all the days of my life. Shifti beveit Adonai kol yemei chayai. Shifti beveit Adonai kol yemei chayai. Ay 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 lai la lai lai la lai. Yai lai lai ay ay lai lai ay lai lai lai. Yai ay lai lai ay lai lai lai. Thank you again, Sandra. Thank you again, everyone, so much for coming. Next week, it's our very own Lucinda Kurtz, and joined by Gabriel Pescador, who has been with us on several occasions. And that will wrap up the 4 weeks of MOSh Goes Mussar. And because you know what, 2 weeks from tonight is the first night of Rosh Hashanah. And this is real, and I'm completely unprepared. So good night, everyone. Sandra,
Shana Tova.
have a good dinner. Kativa v'chatima tova. You should be written and sealed for a good, happy, healthy new year. Thank you, everyone.
Not to everybody.
Thank
Shana Tova.
you.